At the end of this video, I'm going to open this Christmas present. This Christmas present has waited almost 70 years to be unwrapped. It was intended for a 7-year-old boy during World War II, and I'm going to tell you the remarkable story about how this gift came into my possession and the remarkable story. I'm calling this video a Christmas ghost story, but it's really a Christmas story of hope. And I hope you see it as that. And I've had this present for 12 years in my possession. I've never opened it. And Connecticut had a white Christmas. Look out the window, we had a white Christmas this year. And I'm very sick today. I'm dead sick. I've been sick for a week and I haven't been able to do anything. But I came into my office today because I really felt this story needed to be told. You know, I've waited this long. This is a fake fireplace. It's not going to catch on fire. Let me set it back there. Excuse me. I've had the present for years, and I was really inspired by the snowy Christmas, as you could see outside the window here. And it's a story about a Christmas during World War II. And it all began around the year 2000. I got a call. Now, I've collected toys. I'm Mike Mozart on YouTube, and you can see I have one of the largest collections of toys in the world, and I did back in the 90s. And I got a call from an elderly woman that was late 90s, mid to late 90s. And she called me and she said her sister had passed away recently and she had a lot of toys that she wanted to sell. And she asked me if I'd come over and look at them. And I said, what kind of toys are they? And she said she didn't know. They were all wrapped as Christmas presents. But she knew there were toys there from every Christmas for the past 50 Christmases. And I was sort of shocked about it. And she didn't want to elaborate on the phone. And I said, what are you doing with the money that you earned from these? Because she sounded quite elderly. And she said she was going to give it to a charity. And I said, the best thing for you to do is to let me come over. We'll unwrap them all, and I'll show you which ones are valuable, because I'm sure if there are toys from the 50 years ago, the 1940s and 50s, there are probably some very valuable ones. And that'd be the best thing, you know, for if it is this charity to get more money. And she agreed to it. Now, at the time she called, it was late April, early May. It was beautiful and sunny, and it was warm, and like the daffodils and tulips were blooming. It was really nice. So I went to this house, and it had been her sister's house. Her sister had passed away recently. And she had the windows open because it was such a beautiful, like the first beautiful day that you could actually let all the warm air in. And we walked into a living room that was filled with wrapped Christmas presents. A lot of wrapped Christmas presents. And you could tell by the wrapping paper that they covered a huge expanse of time. And there was a Christmas tree that was off to the side that had lost a lot of its needles at that point. And I'm looking at the tree thinking it looked decades old. And I asked the woman how all the gifts had gotten there, what the story was of the gifts. And she said she had never told anybody the story of those Christmas presents, that no one knew. But she'd tell me. She said, I wanted to tell this story for 50 years. She said, if you want to hear it. I sat down in a big easy chair that didn't have any presents in it. And she pulled a hassock, an ottoman, up to the chair right in front of me. And she grabbed my hands tight in her old hands that were beautiful. And she had the most beautiful blue eyes. They were just like the softest blue. And she looked right into my eyes and she said, most of the presents there, or all of them, were intended for her son who had died during World War II when he was 7 years old. And there were presents there for her husband as well. And she began the story. And she told me that her husband, you know, the woman who had died, was in World War II. He was in Europe, and he was stationed there. And her son had taken sick. Her son had gone to the hospital. He was 7 years old. And he was desperately ill. And he was getting worse and worse. And the sister had contacted the Red Cross to see if the father could come home, because the doctors at the hospital said it was very unlikely that he was going to survive. The boy was very, very bad, and he kept going into comas and coming out of comas. And that all the son wanted when he came awake was to see his father. Now the mother mentioned to the son that his father might be home for Christmas. So the Red Cross had gotten through, and the military agreed to allow him to go home because his son was dying, or very potentially going to die. So she got a telegram, the mother got a telegram at the hospital from someone in the Red Cross saying, saying, your husband will be home. We're doing everything we can. We've got his papers so we can go on leave, so we can come home and see his son. Maybe there'll be a Christmas miracle and the son will pull through with his father there. And apparently the Red Cross had pitched it to them that it would be a great newsreel thing. You know, son miraculously recovers because father comes home to see him. And the son had pneumonia. He had another problem. I don't remember what it was, but I know he had pneumonia too. So the mother spent all of her time at the hospital with this child who was very, very sick. And at the hospital, the boy had his teddy bear. I'll tell you more about the teddy bear in a few minutes. And a little picture of himself and his father. And it was in a little leather frame that was all stitched around like a Western thing. And it had Dad stamped in the center and the front. And the mother was very excited. And the telegram said that he was going to be home for Christmas. Absolutely would be home. And that they would all spend Christmas morning together unwrapping presents, stringing popcorn and cranberries. She was very specific about that. And so they were all very excited that it was going to happen. So the sister and the mother of the child were at the hospital. And the boy had slipped into a coma, had been in a coma for several hours. And the doctors said he was in very bad condition. And the mother had been awake for hours, and the mother had fallen asleep at the son's bedside holding her son. And so the sister was in the room sitting in a chair. And this is the story she's telling to me. And she said, the father walked in. Her husband and the son's father had walked in, full military uniform with a big smile and bright eyes, happy. And he walked in, and the boy woke up, the boy's eyes open. And he said, Daddy, and held his arms out. And the father came over and gave him a big hug and a kiss. So the sister shook her sister that was asleep. Look, 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 your husband's here. And she woke up and she saw him. And she said, you're back. You made it in time for Christmas. And he says, I promised you I'd be here for Christmas. Christmas morning, we're going to be unwrapping presents. And we're going to be stringing popcorn. And we're going to be stringing cranberries. So the boy says, I knew you'd be home, Dad. I knew you'd be home. I got to get a drink of water. And so the sister decided she would run and get a nurse to say, Nurse, you know, my nephew has woken up. Come take a look. He's awake. So she got a nurse, and they ran back to the room. They went in the room, and the mother was awake, looking like she was talking to her husband, and the son was still unconscious. So the woman ran, you know, the nurse ran over to the boy, you know, and saying, I think his heart stopped. I got to get a doctor. And the sister's looking, he was surprised. Where was her husband? What happened in that short time? And she sat next to her sister, who was still acting like she was talking to her husband. And she looked up and she saw the man holding the boy in his arms. She said, I was there. She said, Mr. Mozart, Mike, you have to believe me. He was there and he was holding the boy in his arms. He wasn't in bed. And he was awake and happy. And the boy looked at her and mother and says, Daddy says that he's never going to go back to war. He's never going to leave me again. He's going to be with me forever and ever and ever. And the mother said, but that can't be what happens, but he's here for now for Christmas. And the husband says, no, I promised you I'd be home to open presents and string popcorn and cranberries, and I'm here. And I'm never going away again. And he turned and walked towards the door. And says, where are you going? He says, I'm taking my son home. He says, I'm going home, Mommy. We'll see you at home, Mommy. And the sister said at that moment, she looked down and the boy was back in bed unconscious. And that the mother had sort of climbed up into bed with the son and had her arms around him. And the doctors came in and said that the boy had passed away. And so she told me that story. Now, this was just a few days before Christmas. It was a couple days before the husband was expected home. And as far as everyone knew, he was coming home at that point. So the doctors let the mother sit with the son for a little while like that. And the mother, when they tried to wake her up, they said that the woman said it was catatonic or something. That she said you could actually lift her arm up and it would stay there. it wouldn't fall back down, and you could like pose her into positions. She said it was so tragic, and she didn't know what to think at the time. They put the mother into another bed in the room next door, and the mother was given something to sedate her, I guess, even though she was, you know, completely catatonic, as they said. The sister didn't know what to do, because now her husband and the boy's son was going to be coming home. Boy's father, I should say, should be coming home for the son. He was coming home to celebrate Christmas, but he was going to come home and unfortunately be there at his son's funeral. So about 24 hours later, she said that she was still at the hospital with her sister, and her sister had not woken up. And she said that a military card pulled up outside the hospital, and all the nurses at the hospital noticed it pull up, because I guess it was a big turnaround in front of the hospital. And they all thought it was the boy's father, because he had a picture of him that said Dad with him, and they knew exactly what he looked like, so they were expecting he was going to come out of the car and then have to give him the bad news. And then when 3 men got out of the car and they had papers in their hands, the nurses all got really upset, because the nurses, you know, they were young nurses and older nurses, all had husbands or sons that were in the war overseas. This was the height of World War II. And they were afraid they were going to come in and tell them that their husband had died or son had died. So they came in, and the nurses said they were silent and frightened. And an officer looked at a nurse and said, "Who's the head of the nurses here? Who's the head here?" And she told her, says, I'm here because there was a father that was supposed to come home for his son, and he'd gotten a military transport on the way back. He had gotten on one. They sort of got him onto something to get him home, and it got shot down on the way home the day before, and he had died in the crash. And the nurses all stared at him, and they said, "That's the exact same time that the boy's father showed up here." And he said, "What happened?" The mother and the sister claimed the father showed up and took their son home at the exact same time at the same time the father died, the son had died at the same time. So they couldn't speak to the mother, but they came in and talked to the sister and told the sister what happened. Now the woman was still unconscious in bed, and it was 3 weeks before she could go home. And imagine going home to an empty house now with no son and no father for her son, no husband. And the sister said that she seemed to come back and be a normal person again. But when Christmas came, she said she noticed that she still had her wedding ring on, but she didn't say anything about it. But noticed that she was knitting a sweater for her husband. And she bought Christmas presents for her son. And the sister didn't say anything about it. It was still a tragedy they didn't talk about. And this tradition started happening every single year. Her sister never mentioned it. No one in town knew it. None of her co-workers. The woman had gotten a job as a public servant. No one had ever known that she was still holding out hope that her son and husband would be home for Christmas. And this started around 1943 and went up until the year she died. And she died Christmas 1999. So I'm moving the story up to that point, because that's important right now. Is that her sister never really talked to the sister that lost her husband and son at Christmas time, because she knew that she probably wanted to be by herself, and she never mentioned anything that had happened before. She had never remarried. Neither sister had married, actually. And she got a call at 7:45 in the morning on Christmas Day. She called her sister and said, "They're here. My son's home and he's well. My husband's here. They're opening presents." She said she was so excited and so happy. And she could hear voices in the background. She said, "Who's there with you?" And she said, it's my husband and it's my son. They're opening presents. They're having such a good time. And she thought that her sister was either totally losing it or someone else was there, because she distinctly heard voices. And she asked if she had her television set on. She said, No, they're here. We're gonna have Christmas dinner, and we've strung popcorn and cranberries, and we're opening our presents. So the sister hung up the phone, And it was 7:45. She remembers the time. You'll know why too. She drove right over to her sister's house. It was less than 15 minutes away, and she got there by 8. And she walked into the house. She had a key to get in, and her sister had passed away. Her sister was in the living room. And her sister, had finally died after all those years. And there was no unwrapped presents, but the table was set for Christmas dinner. There was dishes in the sink, as though several people had eaten breakfast. 3 people at least had eaten breakfast. There was a pumpkin pie that had been cut into 8 slices, and 6 were missing. And there was popcorn and cranberries strung on the tree. And there had been a fire in the fireplace. So she called up an ambulance, and she had told them that her sister had passed away. And they called the medical examiner to go over to make sure that it wasn't, an untimely death. The examiner came in and said, I can't believe that your sister called you. And she says, why? She says, this woman died probably 7 hours ago, because he tested for things like lividity or something, and says she could not have been alive for at least 5 to 7 hours. He actually put the time of death hours earlier. But she said she called me less than 45 minutes ago. I talked to her on the telephone. And he said it was impossible. So it brings it up to now. So she told me this story, and she said, I was there. She said, I was there. And I looked at her and I said, I've got the craziest question for you. When she was telling me this story about her husband walking, her sister's husband walking into the hospital room. Excuse me, I got such a bad cold. I swear for a moment that I saw it like you saw it. Did the father take his hat off and put it on his son's head before he hugged him? She says, yes, he did. I didn't tell you that. And I said, I swear I could see it. And I could smell like fresh paint and like Lysol or something. It's like the smell was so strong. And she had said, yeah, they had just painted the hospital. They had just painted, and the smell of paint was very strong. And I was so shocked to listen to this whole story. And I told her a story about my grandmother and how I shared something with her and her sister. Is that my grandmother died just before Christmas. Just a few years before I went to go look at all these presents. And she died 2 days before Christmas. And I went back to my grandmother's house, and there was the Christmas tree set up and all my Christmas presents my grandmother had bought for me underneath the Christmas tree. And I took those presents, and I still have them. I never unwrapped any of the presents that my grandmother gave me from that year. And I still don't think I'm ready to unwrap them yet. I always felt that I was sort of needed to wait for some reason, because my grandmother was in the hospital and she wasn't expected to stay too long, and I used to visit her all the time. And she promised that she'd be home for Christmas and we'd unwrap those presents. It's a very similar situation to what happened. And I said to her, and something else happened to me when I was at my grandmother's hospital. I said I was there when she died. I was actually there. And my grandmother her husband had died around 1976 or 77, and I was at the hospital at the time. And he promised my grandmother that he would be home and they'd go dancing. I'll be home, don't worry. I'll be fine. The doctors expected he was going to recover. He'd had a stroke, but the doctors expected he'd recover. And he says, don't worry, I'll be home and we'll go dancing. Because my grandfather and grandmother used to like to dance. And unfortunately, the next day my grandfather passed away, so he never got to fulfill that promise. And I'm at the hospital with my grandmother, and she just seemed to be getting really weak, and I was there visiting her. Man, it was just before Christmas. It was just 2 days before Christmas. And she asked me if I'd go get her a ginger ale, because the hospital had like a place you can get little cans of soda and ice in cups, and you could bring them back to the rooms like that. And I went to go get her one, and I came back, and I had the ginger ale in a cup in my hand, and I walked to the door, and I pushed the door open, and the door would kind of stay open if you pushed it open all the way. And I stood there and I looked, and I saw this room like a big dance hall, and there was a bar along a back wall, and It smelled like varnish. All I kept thinking, it smelled like varnish and smoke. And it smelled like flowers. It smelled like a flower called mock orange, which was one of my grandmother's favorites. And it was hot. I could feel that it was hot and humid. And there was windows open, and there were screens in all the windows with moths flying around them. And there was lights on the ceiling and ceiling fans, and it was hot, and it was probably very late at night. There were very few people left in this place. I have no idea what it was or where it was, and I saw my grandfather. My grandfather, young. I saw him probably 27 to 30. Young and vital, and I recognized him immediately. And he started walking across the room, and I saw my grandmother sitting on a bench against a wall. He came over and he passed her this cup. And it's funny because at the time I thought, well, my grandfather got the ginger ale for her. And I was there, and I looked down at my shoes, and I could see, I was wearing Nike sneakers. I looked down, I could see him against this hardwood shiny floor. And I looked back up, and my grandfather was talking to my grandmother, and she was so young and beautiful, and she didn't have glasses, and she was wearing this beautiful blue dress, and she had this big white collar on it. It was so pretty. And my grandfather looked very dapper, and he had these shiny, shiny black leather shoes. And he took her by the hand, and they walked out on the dance floor. And a song started playing. At the time, I didn't know what the song was. I learned later the song was called Moonlight Serenade by Glenn Miller. And I stood there looking at this scene. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And I all of a sudden I got pushed, a real hard push against the door jamb. A nurse had come by, and I could hear the heart monitor had flatlined, heard that zzz noise. And I sort of came to, and a doctor and a nurse ran in right after her. And I said, I was just so stunned. I started to talk, and I walked. My grandmother's room that she was in was right at the end of a hall, and there was a bench and a little chair and a half-dead plant. And I went over and sat down. I still had the ginger ale in my hand and the cup, and I put it down. And a few moments later, that first nurse that pushed me back to reality came over to me, and she sort of kneeled down in front of me, and she looked me right in the eyes, and she said, "What were you looking at? When you were standing at that doorway, what were you seeing? You were like somewhere else." And I said, I wasn't there. I was like in a big room. It looked like it might have been a barn converted to a dance hall, and there was like a bar along the back, and there was a stage, but nobody was on it. And there was like speakers on the walls, and I saw my grandmother and grandfather, and they started to dance. And she said, "Did you smell flowers?" And I said, "Yes. They're a flower called mock orange. My grandmother always had bushes of those growing outside. And she loved them. I used to pick them and bring them in for her." And she said, "I saw it too. I saw the same thing. For a moment, I saw the exact same thing." And she said, "I've been here a nurse for like 50 years. She's been a nurse for a long time." And she said she's only seen that one time before. And I was the only time, this time she confirmed it, that someone else saw the same thing. And I said, what's going on with my grandmother?" They said her heart stopped, and they're trying to revive her. I said, "Oh my God, don't revive her. She's so happy. Don't revive her." And she said, "Don't worry, she's gone. But I think she's happy right now," and I'm sure she was really happy. Happiest I've ever seen her. So I told this story to the woman, so we had a lot in common, that we'd both seen something. And now we looked at all the presents, and we started opening up all those presents. 50 years of presents. Intended for a boy that would never open them all. And presents for her husband. Every year she bought her husband a pipe, because at the time smoking wasn't the bad thing it is today, and she bought him a pipe and tobacco every year. Like a little pouch of special tobacco, like applewood smoked tobacco and cinnamon tobacco and all these odd flavored tobaccos. And it was unwrapping a history of toys. Oh, the first early Tinker toys and Lincoln Logs and Lego sets, and it went all the way through the decades where Scooby-Doo and Flintstones toys, and there was color forms. They went all the way up through. She bought the Thing Maker machine in the 60s, and she bought one of the Marx Ford Apache sets, and all the toys. And you could just tell when they were from because of the ages. And she, all the way up to Furby. The last toy she probably bought was a Furby, which were popular around 1998, 99, in that time period. So here were all these toys all unwrapped now, and it seemed like we took all day to unwrap them. We unwrapped from 10 o'clock in the morning, and when we were finished, we thought it was like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and she had a key wine clock on the mantle that wasn't wound, and we weren't paying attention to the time, and it only taken us 3 hours to unwrap them. We were so surprised it only took 3 hours to do it. So all the presents were there, and so I talked to her more, and I said, "Is there anything else that you forgot to say? Anything else about what had happened?" She said after her son had passed away, the nurses came in to me a few hours later, and they said they had taken the boy away to the funeral home and asked if she wanted the bear the boy had. She said it was a policy generally they would burn things. If a child was sick, they would burn them at the time so it couldn't be spread to someone else, I guess, something like that. But she insisted, and she kept the bear and the little picture of the boy and the father. And the boy had had several little tin or lead soldiers there. And she took them home. And she said, "They're upstairs. If you'd like to see those toys, they're still here." So she took me up to the boy's bedroom, and it had been never touched. It was clean as anything. Tiny little bit of dust there, probably from the months that her sister had passed away, but there was the bear sitting on the boy's bed, sort of waiting for its owner that never came home. And the picture that he held of his father and him was on the dresser with the little soldiers around it. And I remarked that the bear was very valuable. The bear was actually a Steiff bear. It was a lot older than the 1940s. And she said it belonged to her sister as a child, and that she was going to keep it. She wasn't going to sell it. It was we had the button in the ear. And I said it was worth several $100s even at the time. It would be worth a lot now. It'd probably be worth $20,000 now. But she said she couldn't part with it. It was too much sentimental value to her. So we walked downstairs, and I was just thinking about what a heartbreaking day it was for me. But what a day of hope too, if you think about it. And we went downstairs, and I walked over to the tree because there were some Christmas lights on the trees that were shaped like Santas and snowmen and things. And I said they were actually collectible. And then I gave her some names of people that would be interested in buying the things from her. And we noticed there was one present that we didn't unwrap. It was under a chair. There was like an easy chair that had been covered in gifts next to the tree. And there was a skirt on the bottom of the chair. A present had gotten underneath. You could see a little bit of it poking out. And that's this present. This present right here. This present, I don't know what vintage it is, but I imagine it's older because it was where the older presents were, right underneath where the tree was. And it has waited all these years. And I'm going to open it right now and find out what's been waiting all these years to be opened. I have a pair of scissors here, and it's odd. The paper is glued to it. There's no Scotch tape or wrapping tape. So let's see what's inside. This is the first time this has been opened. And how many years? I'm just guessing it's one of the earlier ones. Hold on. I'll hold up so you can see this. There's a lot of layers of paper on this. I don't want to use the scissors because I want to cut whatever's inside this package. I might have to use the scissors. This is wrapped so tightly. Oh. I've had such a bad cold for like a week. Oh my god. I can't believe I'm opening this. It's one of my grandmother's presents. I've had this for 12 years or so. It's a set of American bricks by Hal Sam. It's the wooden ones. They were made before 1946 or 47 because they switched to plastic. Oh my God. Oh, the box has never been opened. They were like they're wooden bricks that were punched out, and they were like the earliest version of Lego toys. These pre-existed Lego. Usually they had cardboard separators inside the boxes. Maybe because it was made during World War II, they saved on the cardboard and didn't put them inside. You can date these by if there's a patent number. Yeah, this set was, oh my God. This set was made probably around 1943. There's a buy war bond sticker printed on it. Oh my God, this is probably the toy he got for his first Christmas and he never opened. Probably. I'll try to film something a little better of this to show what the toy was. Don't think that this is, I know the story's sad, but the story's kind of a story of hope because it's a story of a woman that waited 55 years for her husband and son to come back, and they did come back. She did enjoy her Christmas with them. And a story of my grandmother and how much similar we were. I've never kept in touch with the woman that did this. She actually asked me never to tell this story, but it was 12 years ago, and she was in her mid-90s. And it was just such a nice day in Connecticut, and it was snowing, and I just wanted to finally open it and tell this story. Oh my God, I don't know if I'm even going to post this. I might delete this video. I don't know. I don't want to sound like an idiot. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Thanks again for listening to me. I hope your Christmas is wonderful, and I hope that you spend time with the people that you love, because they won't be around forever. And cherish every moment of it, okay? Thanks again.